The calendar has flipped to July, and that's exciting because it means that it is time for Coach Pac Kilby and myself to kick off our roster preview series, starting with none other than Mr. Elliot Cadeau.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. I hope you had a great 4th of July and didn't shoot off any of your fingers. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me today, as he does every week, is our guy, Coach Pac Kilby, coming to us today from Houston, Texas. I guess it's Big 12 country now down there, Pac. And that's fun stuff. We want to thank you for listening to today's show and being a part of the Locked On Tar Heels family, folks. Seriously, thank you so much for always being with us. Coming up on the show, basically, here's what we do. If you missed this last summer, we start in the summer, one player per week, and we go through the entire Carolina roster, one player at a time. And that just basically leads up to the season. Pac and I did this last summer, and honestly, Pac, I think you feel the same way, but it was just a lot of fun to dig into these guys a little bit more. And for those of you that would like to see it all, what we'll do is put it all together in a playlist on YouTube. So if you want to go back and check out the whole roster and all these episodes, you can do that. Basically, what we'll do is we're going to start with the freshmen and then work our way up the seniority ladder. And so it'll be Zayden High next week, but this week we start with Elliot Cadeau. And the way we do this is we always start with a little more of their bio so you can get to know them a little bit more if you've missed any of these details. So Pac, why don't you start and hit us with some of those details of Elliot Cadeau's biographical information?
Yeah, so obviously he was originally class of 2024 and reclassified to class of 2023. Comes to us from Leaky Academy, which is a great place to develop. And there's been a lot of good players come from there. Elliot, born September 4th, 2004. So he's fairly old for class of 2024, which makes his reclassification a little bit easier, being the fact that he's a little older. He's a point guard, obviously. I think we all know that. Originally from Brooklyn, New York. He started at Bergen Catholic High School in New Jersey. And his AAU team was New Heights Lightning. So, and Isaac, you may know, I don't recall if there was anyone that was just as big time as him that played on his AAU circuit with him. Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, and that probably tells me that there wasn't.
Yeah. I don't think there was either. Elliott 6'1", 175, so decent size for a point guard. 5-star recruit, as we all know. And then obviously his rankings were a little different, but with the reclass, they've changed a little bit. ESPN has him as the 13th best player in 2023 class, 8th in Rivals, 12th in 24/7 Sports, and On3 has him at 15. So by all accounts, he's a top 15 player in the country, even with the reclass. Committed to Carolina on the 28th of December in 2022.
I forgot it was right around Christmas until we were putting all this info back together.
Yeah, heck of a Christmas present for the Tar
right? And then James Brown was like right after New Year's Day.
That's right. Yeah,
so it was just boom, boom, boom. Yeah,
and then we were on Drake a little before that too, I think. So we had all three of those kind of in a somewhat similar.
Yeah, Drake was first of the three. That's right, or of the four, excuse me, before Elliot.
And by the way, I mean, I know we're not talking about him, but he's turned out to be really stinking good. And he chose Carolina. Elliot chose Carolina over Kansas, Syracuse, Texas, Louisville, Texas Tech. I mean, that's easy. None of those programs are even close to the Tar Heels, especially Kansas. Twitter handle, Elliot Cadeau, ELLIOTCADEAU. And then his Instagram handle is Elio with 3 L's.
3 L's, man. I was like straining at the computer screen to make sure I got it right, but it is 3 L's.
Yep. And so, yeah, that's the bio on Elliot. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for Carolina, and I look forward to watching him play.
Yes. Yeah, like I'm looking again. It is 3 L's. Wild world we live in these days. So, Pac, let's just start here, and then we'll answer some more questions here in a little bit. But as you said, we all know he's a point guard, and that's the big thing. That's the story. Elliot Cadeau coming in and gonna really hopefully help make just the offense flow better. But here's what I want both of us to answer. If you we all know about the assists. We know about his ability to pass. If you take that away, Elliot Cadeau can never pass the basketball this season. What is the next thing on his skill set that most excites us?
Oh, that's really tough to pick because I think there's several.
Well, you get one and I get one. Don't you steal mine.
Right. Mine is, I don't know what yours is, but mine is speed.
Dang it, I hate you. Now
Okay.
I got to get a new one.
Sorry, but my thing is, we've all been wanting transition to be back, and I think that he does that. So, yeah, I'll go with speed. I think his speed is elite.
I think that's got to be the right answer, and is part of what makes his passing so dynamic in the way it is because he has this speed that can be game-changing level. I mean, I don't think that's an overstatement, but also recognizes that that's not always the fastest way to get the ball up the court, and it's nice that he can do it. I know I just took away his ability to pass, but it's nice that he can move the ball with his feet or with a pass, and I think he sees that really well. Since you took speed, I'm going to say just his bounce. Like, even though he's only 6'1", we've seen this dude have the ability to get up and do that, like play above the rim a little bit when he needs to. And I think that's important when you have a short backcourt like Carolina is going to have next year with Elliot and RJ. You know, like I read a Duke article recently where they're like talking, I think it was called The Curious Case of Elliot Cadeau. And it was like, oh, Elliot Cadeau, obviously a dynamic player, but I don't know about the fit at North Carolina because there's only one basketball that Elliot and RJ can have. And it's like, well, listen, they recognize that RJ, Elliot's going to have the ball. It's not going to be like it has been the past couple of years with that lack of role definition. But part of it is they're going to make up for that lack of size with his ability to just get up and do stuff with his athleticism. And so I know that's still part of the speed conversation, but I think all of that goes together to give him, with all due respect to Kendall Marshall, I think he is a more athletic version of that, albeit a little bit shorter.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Kendall Marshall 2.0. But that article, that you mentioned a minute ago, that's interesting that they're questioning the, way the relationship will work between Cadeau and RJ Davis when RJ just finished playing with Caleb Love. So,
well, and I think they were questioning it because of the issues with Caleb and RJ not always being able to coexist very well.
Right. But then you look at it, but Cadeau's main thing is that he creates for others.
Right.
And then himself second. And so that's where I'm kind of like, I think it's going to be a great fit because that's exactly what we've been needing.
Exactly. Listen, it's Duke just trying to hate on North Carolina. We got to cut them some slack. They can't figure this all out.
Well, and when they do that, they throw out all reason. They just look for something to go at.
Well, folks, we just talked about a couple of Elliot's strengths. We do want to look, no player's complete. We want to look at some weaknesses where he still needs to grow and look at what will make for a successful freshman season for Elliot Cadeau. We'll do that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to hit the first home run in a game. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Pac, here we go. We just talked about some strengths of Elliot Cadeau's beyond his ability to pass, which we both believe is his elite skill set. But Pac, what is it that you see that Elliot still needs to work on? I'll ask it this way. If you were an opposing coach, how would you game plan for or exploit Elliot Cadeau's game?
Well, here's the thing with Elliot, and we've kind of already talked about it. He's a great passer. He has speed, and he has decision-making. So what you want to do is try to eliminate his ability to do those three things, which is way easier said than done. But the reality is, if I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, and I think we all kind of know this too. Elliot is going to handle the rock for Carolina, and he's going to make the show run. Can we turn him into a scorer? And essentially what that looks like is we're not going to help off of RJ. We're not going to help off of Harrison Ingram. We're full denial there. We're going to try to put Cadeau on an island and make him take tough shots or play off of him and make him take shots from the perimeter. And so to me, that's how I would attack that. Yeah. Now, like I said, that's way easier said than done, because when you start putting him on an island, then that's when that speed comes into play. And exactly. Elliot's going to go, I'm one-on-one. I'm going to draw you out, and then I'm going to blow by you.
Yeah.
And then I'm decision-making. If they help off, I'm dishing. If they don't, I'm finishing. So that's why it's really tough. But I do think, in previous years, maybe you could help off of Leaky Black, or maybe you could help off of Pete Nance or whoever that is. This team, you really can't. And that's what is going to make us a lot more dangerous offensively moving forward. And so when I say it's way easier said than done, it truly is. You have to have someone that's a very dynamic defender at the point guard position to make this work. But when I look at Cadeau's game, that's the only way I truly see that you can, disrupt his flow offensively. The only other thing, that I think is that you could maybe try to speed him up and make quick decisions.
That's a good point.
But that typically requires a double team or blitzing ball screens or whatever that is, which means you're playing 4-on-3 on the backside, and that's where he thrives, is creating. So you kind of have to have the right pieces defensively to do that for him or to him.
And not many teams are going to be able to.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think he's one that may be the toughest player that we have to slow down. And I know that's a bold statement considering he hasn't played a college basketball game yet, but his skill set it's very dynamic.
Well, and I think that's a great point about trying to speed him up as a potential game plan to upset what he does well. Like we heard, I can't remember if you and I talked about this on the show or just in our real life, but Cole Anthony's quote about how Elliot, probably the biggest thing he needs to learn to work on is downshifting and upshifting, like playing at different speeds. And if he's continuing to play at hyper warp speed all the time, then getting sped up is a problem. But if he's learning to downshift better and getting sped up, then it doesn't matter because he's got, some headroom for some more speed. And so there is that. And going back to your first thing about like not helping off of other players, like you said, I mean, we talk all the time about his passing capability, but this dude can get anywhere on the floor he wants. He can get into the paint. He can finish at the rim. And so it's like, man, don't double team him at your risk, but also double team him at your risk. And that's part of what I think is so potentially diabolical about him in terms of facing other teams.
Yeah. And if I can add something real quick, well, two things.
Please do, Pac. I would always like you to add something.
First of all, I've noticed this summer, and we haven't talked about this yet. I'd be curious your thoughts, but it seems like a lot of the Carolina pros and the alumni are spending more time on campus this summer than they have in the past.
Because they don't want what happened last year to happen again.
Exactly. And that's, my friends, let me tell y'all something. That is the culture protecting itself.
That's right.
And it's why it's awesome to be a North Carolina Tar Heel. So Cadeau, he's working out with Kobe White and Cole Anthony and Puff Johnson or Cam Johnson.
Ooh,
and
not
all
Puff
these guys.
anymore.
Yeah, not Puff. Cam, sorry. And I mean, it's just that development, though, is just huge. He's learning from those guys. And the other thing I was going to say is if you're going to speed Cole Anthony up, you better do it in the first half of the season, because I think his IQ and the way he's going to progress, it's going to be tough to do by the time ACC play rolls around. He's going to figure it out pretty quick.
You said Cole there. I'm assuming you meant Elliot.
I'm sorry. Elliot. No, I'm all over the place. Elliot.
Man, did you just tell me we're getting Cole back? He's got eligible. No, I'm just kidding. So, yes, agreed on all of that. And I think it's going to be so beneficial. Now, Pat, here's another question. You know, there's been all the conversation. I think we all assume he's going to be in the starting lineup. We all assume all that's going to be. Speaking of which, well, no, I'll save that comment for a little bit later. But assuming the health is in there, I think we probably both think Elliot will start from day one. But my question to you is, assuming health, does Elliot Cadeau start every game this season?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very simple question that we don't even really have to talk about. Like, he is that level of good and prepared and ready. And let's not make that more of a question than it needs to be. Okay, let me ask you this. Imagine that you're Hubert Davis. You're nice enough to be Hubert Davis, I'll tell you that much. And you're sitting down at the end of the 23-24 basketball season. It has been a successful year for Elliot if blank.
If Elliot shoots 35% from the three-point line and averages less than a turnover and a half per game.
Okay.
That's kind of my standard going in. And I'll say this. Let me kind of back that up a little bit. I don't think Cadeau has to shoot 6 attempts from the three-point line a game. But it's kind of what we talked about. If you can play off and turn him into a shooter and less of a playmaker, then you've probably done your job defensively.
Yeah.
But where, if he can get 2 or 3 attempts per game and just shoot that at a 35% clip, just enough to be a pretty good threat.
Yes.
If he's 35%, that's a point per possession. So that's a threat from the three-point line. And if he can do that, then that makes him virtually impossible to guard. The only way you can do it is if you're just flat out a better athlete than him. And there's not many of those. That's why he reclassed and he's still a top 10 player in the country. So he's going to be really tough to guard if he can do that. And then if his decision-making is good to go along with that, and he's at less than a turnover and a half per game, then that means he's done a good job of being a threat, and he runs the show efficiently.
Yep.
And if we do, that's all we have to do, really, offensively, to be really good, is just value the ball and have guys on the perimeter that are threats.
And I would say 2 things to that. Part of it is I think – like, the coaching staff has to make sure he understands, like, bro, you've got phenomenal shooters around you in RJ and Cormac and some of the others that'll come in, Paxson, whomever it is. But, like, it doesn't have to be you. Like, you don't have to take this on your shoulders. I think we often talked about with Caleb, like, it felt like he took too much of that weight. And Elliot, like, we need you to shoot and to be a threat, but you have the ability to get it. Like, I want RJ to have 6 3-point attempts per game. I want Cormac to have 5-6 3-point attempts per game. So get it to them in position to make that shot. The other thing I would say is I think, and you're not saying this, Pac, but I just want to make sure we make this point clear, that Elliot is not a bad shooter, right? I think it's just because his passing capability is so high level that people are like, well, he's not a great shooter. The dude's confident with his shot. He just needs to make sure that's not his default. He needs to make sure his shot taking is wise and not rushed or because he's just wide open or whatever, right? Like, and so I think those are the 2 things I would add on to what you've already said, because I think those are brilliant points. So I like that. Let's get like 3 3-point attempts per game at a 35% clip and under 1.5 turnovers a game. I love it, Pac, and I think that's great. Now, one of our favorite things to do when we get into these player preview episodes is to make some player comps and to do some over-under estimation. We should probably keep track of those over-unders. We never did that last year, and so I have no idea how right or wrong we were. Maybe somebody out there is keeping track of it for us. So we want to do that, and we'll hit those in just a second. All right, Pac Kilby, we're talking about Elliot Cadeau. Today, it is the first episode of the 2023 offseason roster preview series. Make sure you tune in with us next week as well. We'll be talking Zayden High. So, Pac, let's do some player comparisons. And folks, what we always like to do is give a UNC comp and an NBA comp. And I know it's never perfect or identical, just like analogies and metaphors, but it is at least a helpful endeavor to help us understand these young men better. So, Pac, if you looked at Mr. Elliot Cadeau, who would you?
I would think that, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think Kendall Marshall is the comparison from North Carolina, and he's kind of the K Butter 2.0. He's got all the passing, but he's got a little bit more versatility and speed. And I think he's going to prove to probably be a little bit more of an efficient scorer. I see a little Marcus Page in there too, though. Just because Marcus was such a competitor and such a dog, like emotionally and stuff, I see a little bit of that in Cadeau as well. And then professionally, I'm going to just go a little bit down the road to Winston-Salem and look at a little Mr. Chris Paul.
Ooh.
I don't, Chris was kind of earlier in his career, he was more of a scorer than he is now. And I kind of think that Cadeau compares more to an older Chris Paul that's just got a really high IQ and he's pretty savvy and he makes good reads and he creates for others so well, but he's still a threat to score.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my comparison for Cadeau.
I like it. I was just pulling up Chris Paul's numbers at Wake. He averaged his freshman year 5.9 assists and his sophomore year 6.6 assists, but also scored 14.8 points per game and 15.3 points per game. And I know you're comparing the NBA version of him, but just to give some numbers around it, man, if he was putting up that kind of stuff, and I don't think there's any reason to think he couldn't, that would be great. And yeah, I mean, I know Kendall Marshall's the easy comparison, but like, why make it difficult if that's what it is? I love it. Pac, let's talk over-unders, because this is probably my favorite part of these shows. I've got a couple. I think I've got 4 over-unders for us, and obviously the majority of them deal with assist numbers because, I mean, hello, come on. That's what we're talking about here. So my first one, and you and I kind of set this number the other day, if I remember correctly, is averaging 5.5 assists per game over-under. And before you answer, let me put some context around it for everyone listening and watching. Kendall Marshall averaged 9.75 assists per game his sophomore year at Carolina. That I cannot wrap my head around that. But since then, no Tar Heel has averaged more than 5.1, and that was, interestingly enough, Theo in 2017-18. But before Marshall did that in the 11-12 season, Carolina had a player averaged 5 or more assists in 9 of the 10 seasons before that. So there's been a big drop-off since Kendall Marshall left. The leading assist man has had like 3 or 4 assists per game. And I think for the first time, we're going to see that tick up in a major way with Cadeau and, frankly, with the team as a whole. You think about what Harrison Ingram can do and some of those other things. And so, Pac, other notable freshmen, let me give some more context around this. Other notable freshman point guards at Carolina and their average assists their freshman year. I'm just going to go back and work my way chronologically. Ed Cota, 6.9 assists per game his freshman year. That led the ACC, by the way. He led the ACC all 4 years of his career. Ray Felton had 6.7. Ty Lawson, 5.6. K Butter, 6.2. Marcus Page, 4.6. And Kobe White, 4.1. So all of that in mind, Pac, 5.5 assists per game, over or under for Elliot Cadeau?
I'm taking the over. I think he relates a lot more closely to Raymond Felton, Ed Cota, Kendall Marshall style. We've mentioned it. I think he's got the pieces around him.
Guys have to finish. That's the thing. Yeah.
This year could be so drastically different from the last few years. But I know this isn't necessarily a lot to do with Cadeau, but since you brought up Theo Pinson, I think there's a chance we have two guys that average more than 5 assists.
Ooh.
Because I think Harrison Ingram has a lot of Theo Pinson in him.
Yeah.
And so there could be a lot more ball movement going around for Carolina this year. But I definitely think that Cadeau takes the over on 5.5. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I'm going to guess he'll be in the 6 or 7 range. I know that's a little bit of a wide swath there, but like, I just think about, can you imagine if Armando Bacot had an Elliot Cadeau type player with him his whole career, what his numbers would have been like? I mean, just absolutely silly. And so I expect Armando alone to be the recipient of 3 or 4 per game. I just think this is going to help his season so much. So I'm with you. I'm taking the over. All right. Pack. I'm not talking to my son or your full name. Pack. Here's the next one. The question is, how many games will Elliot Cadeau have with double-digit assists? And I'm going to set it at 10 games this season. Over or under 10 games with double-digit assists.
I'm going to go under, and I think it's going to be close. But if you had said it like, I don't know, 7.5, I probably would have taken the over. But yeah, I think it's going to be really, really close to that. I just think that our schedule is somewhat tough, and there may prove to be a bit of a learning curve for him. So I'm going to say under, but it would not surprise me one bit if he got the over.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I might have set that number too high, and I'll own that. Fine, whatever. But yeah, I think the schedule does have a lot to do with it. Like, I'm looking back at Kendall Marshall's freshman year right now. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games of double-digit assists. Now, let me put a caveat on that because he wasn't starting the whole season and had 3 other games with 9 assists and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with 8 assists. So, like, there's a very real world in which Elliot could hit that. I'm curious about Kendall Marshall's sophomore year, how many double-digit assist games he had. Let me count this in real time.
I bet it would be 15 or so.
Holy cow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17. He had 17 double-digit assist games his sophomore year. In fact, he only had 1 game with under 5 assists. That's just silly. So you know what? I'm going to take the over. Give it to me. I'm going to be a contrarian to your under. I'm going to say 12 games with double-digit assists this year for Elliot Cadeau. All right, next one. We got 2 more over-unders here, Pack. What will be the most assists that Elliot Cadeau has this season in a single game? I'm going to set the over-under at 15. That might be a little high. The UNC record, for context, is 18. That was Raymond Felton. And Kendall Marshall hit 15 once and 16 twice. So maybe I should bump this down to 13. Let me say a single game high assist over under 13.
Ooh, I'll take the over. I think there's potential for just blow up monster games from this team offensively. And with him at the helm, I think that he could get that. So I'll take the over.
Yep. I was going to take it even when I said it at 15. It just makes sense. Now, the same was true for Kendall, man. That quartet he had around him his sophomore year was just silly with the things he was doing. But I think it's doable, and I would love to see it happen. All right, Pack, last over-under for Elliot Cadeau here. This one is not about assists. And in fact, let me use this to plug Friday's show. We're going to answer a listener question about the possibility of Elliot spending more than 1 year at North Carolina. But Pack, the final question is this. Over under 1.5 seasons for Elliot Cadeau in a UNC uniform.
Under. This kid is an NBA player right now. I would be totally shocked if he was back for a sophomore season at Carolina. I would love it if he was, because I have another prediction that RJ Davis will be back for a COVID year, and that would be a great backcourt to have 2 years in a row. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. On Friday's show, I'm going to talk about this possibility, but all along I have maintained that it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world for him to come back for a sophomore year. Carolina has only ever had 7 one-and-done players, and only 2 of them were guards. Who were they, Pac? You got them?
I don't. Golly. You're catching me off guard.
Sorry, I didn't prep you for this. They were back-to-back seasons and pretty recent. Everyone is screaming at you. One of them just signed a multi-year. Kobe White.
And Cole Anthony.
There you go. Boom.
Sorry. I'm struggling here. You're mixing my names up. I'm moving slow today, y'all. Sorry.
Yeah, so there's only ever been 2 one-and-done guards at North Carolina. But, man, Elliot, just his mix of what he can do is a little bit different. So I think it is more likely than not that he is gone after this year. But like you said, boy, to have that same backcourt 2 years in a row would be something different. But I got to take the under on this one as well. Woo, Pac, it is great to start off our roster preview series. And it's hard to believe that when this is all said and done, we'll essentially be right on the cusp of the college basketball season. Pretty exciting to think about that as we sit here in the first week of July. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Tar Heels to get your first listen or watch of the day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Heels. You can follow Pac at Coach_K23. Or me at Isaac Schade. If you want to have a longer conversation, email the show lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button to let us know you were here, and leave your comments and thoughts about Elliot Cadeau. Want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back with you on tomorrow's show. But until then, peace.